I'm David Osborne. I run a project called Reinventing America's Schools at the Progressive Policy Institute. We have done a lot of research and writing about urban school systems that work well. What is it? What are the keys? We've looked at the fastest improving urban systems around the country. And from our research, we would say that the keys are: one, school autonomy, letting people who run schools actually run schools, letting them choose their teachers, control the budget, control the learning model, the school day, the calendar, etc., which most urban principals don't control any of that. Two, encouraging them to diversify their learning models, because kids learn differently, they come from different backgrounds, they speak different languages, they have different needs. So in an urban area, we have the luxury of creating different kinds of schools to meet their needs. Then giving their families a choice of school, because we don't want to tell your child that they have to go to a STEM school, and your child, they have to go to a performing arts school, and another child, they have to go to a dual language immersion school. It doesn't make any sense. So let's give them choices. And then the fourth element is accountability for performance. That is, when a school team is failing its students year after year after year and can't turn it around, replace the school with a team that has more promise. And if the school team is doing a great job, do something good for them. Let them replicate, let them create another school to have another strong school in the system. We call those systems 21st century school systems, and we are doing our best to promote them. Today, our purpose in this webinar is to learn how and why some schools have been able to pivot quickly and effectively to remote learning when so many had so much trouble. We have three panelists from three very different kinds of public schools today. An innovation network school from Indianapolis Public Schools, Purdue Polytechnic High School, a group of 6 partnership schools, both elementary and middle, that are part of the school district in Fort Worth, Texas, under the oversight of a district partner, Texas Wesleyan University, and a group of 11 charter and middle and high schools from California and Washington State, Summit Public Schools. So we have 3 panelists. I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves. Shatoya, why don't you go first?
Awesome. My name is Shatoya Ward, and I'm the school principal of Purdue Polytechnic High School in Englewood, located in Indianapolis.
Great. Priscila.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Priscila Dilley, and I have the honor and privilege to serve as the senior officer for the Leadership Academy Network, which is an in-district charter partnership between Fort Worth ISD and Texas Wesleyan. We have 6 campuses that we manage and operate through the network, and I'm just excited to be here and learn from my colleagues today.
Welcome. And Diane.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here with all of you today. I'm Diane Tavner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Summit Public Schools, which is a network of charter schools serving grades 6 through 12 in the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as Washington State and Seattle and Tacoma. And we're excited to be here with you today.
And we also have Tressa Pankovitz, who's our associate director of our project. Tressa, do you want to say hello?
Good morning, and thanks to everybody for joining us for this really important conversation. And we hope it'll have some real practical applicability for people who are in districts that aren't yet doing this, or in areas that aren't yet doing this, and that they can learn about it and then become advocates as well. Great.
So before we start, we always like to get a sense of the audience, who's out there, since we can't see you. So there's a survey on your screen. Could you indicate which group you identify most with? You may fall into several, but the one you identify most with in viewing this webinar. You got 5 choices: parent, educator, funder, journalist, or advocate. And in a few minutes, we'll look at the results. But for now, let's start by learning about your schools. Diane, why don't you start this time? Could you kind of briefly describe your learning model at Summit Public Schools?
I will do my best, David. As we've talked about before, that is always a challenge that I'm sure we will all 3 face, but let me see if I can sum it up fairly quickly. Again, we serve grades 6 through 12, so middle and high school students. our schools are diverse by design. So they serve a very heterogeneous population that's designed to be reflective of the diverse communities in which we're located. And we are focused on 4 key commencement level outcomes. So these are the skills, knowledge, mindsets, habits we want our students to leave high school with as they enter adulthood. And those are, number 1, a real mastery of what we call sort of universal skills. So these are transferable skills that cut across subject areas and that are very intuitive to people. How do you communicate effectively, solve problems, evaluate, make an argument? So that's one commencement level outcome. The second is knowledge. It's really hard to analyze nothing. It's really hard to evaluate nothing. You do have to have some knowledge, but that's really connected to our third commencement level outcome, which is a set of habits of success that we want our students to leave with. These are habits that, again, are pretty intuitive to people. They are related to educational attainment and outcome, and they are teachable. And so sometimes referred to as social emotional learning or non-cognitive skills. But what we're really talking about here is everything from a sense of belonging. So a mindset around I belong here, I am academically capable, I'm a scholar, to one of the most important ones, the ability to self-direct one's learning, set goals, make plans, achieve them. And so that's what we're driving for. And we do that in an environment that's really focused on real world, authentic, project-based learning, coupled with strong mentoring and community that employs a lot of practices we know are really critical for students who come from backgrounds of trauma, all the way to folks who are the most privileged, but it just helps you be a good, successful human being. And so that's about as quickly as I can share with you our model.
We'll learn more as the hour goes on, but let's move on to Shatoya. Tell us about Purdue Polytechnic High School.
Whoa. I'm not going to be that long, but I want to say that we are in the business of reinventing high school. And so like Summit, a lot of our motto is very similar. We worked with Summit earlier in our year, so we're very familiar with their motto, and we thank you for providing a template for us to go by. So a lot of the things that she said, we do coach our students in transferable skills to prepare them for what we say a future society, jobs that does not exist yet. We also facilitate engagement with experts in the community. We believe that our walls extend beyond our classrooms. And then also we like to facilitate projects that lends to real world problems, helping our students to solve those complex problems utilizing the design thinking process while we partner with in the industry and the community. So we got a lot of things going on at Purdue Polytechnic High School. We do not have classes. I think that's the biggest thing that parents realize once they come into our space. They say, oh, wait a minute, where's the class? So, but we're really excited about what we do at Purdue Polytechnic High School and how we set our students up for success.
Can you just give us an example of a project that students would work on?
Hell yes. So for instance, we have, we had a beautifying, so we are in our building, this is our first year, we partnered with the community of Englewood, and they wanted to, they allotted some space that they will want to utilize for our students to be able to, three of them. They had 3 spaces, one to maybe build a facility in the future that our students are designing. They're currently doing that right now. We don't have a gym per se, but our students are using the design thinking process to, build out what the gym could look like. and the resources needed for that. And then also we have an ag project that's going on in that space. They gave us space for an ag project that's going on for the community. And then the third one is a beautifying community. So they are using the roof of the space to outline student engagement. They will call it recreation, but I get a little nervous when it comes down to the roof and you talk about recreation. So 3 projects that our students are literally currently working on with the community.
Great, thank you. And just to clarify, it's your first year in that building, but not your first year as a school, correct?
Yes, that's the first year we are in this building. We've been in session for, this is our 4th year. So I'm so excited because we have our first senior class and we are our first year at full capacity. We did a slow growth model. So it's just an exciting time for our students. Even in the midst of all that's going on, it's still an exciting time for our students.
Great. And Priscilla, tell us about your network of schools.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Shatoya, for just energizing us today. I have more of the little people. So the Leadership Academy Network are about 6 campuses, 4 elementary, a 6th grade campus, and we have 1 middle school, 7th and 8th grade. Our demographics are 60% Black, 30% Hispanic, 10% other. Our campuses are actually neighborhood schools. So we serve our neighborhoods. We serve, the families that are zoned to our campuses. And prior to the Leadership Academy initiative, these campuses were rated as not meeting standard by the state of Texas. And so we modeled the Leadership Academy Network after the ACE model that the state of Texas had put out, in what we were able to reconstitute all 6 campuses. So hire the best and the brightest teachers, administrators. We are able to extend the school day for an additional hour of instruction. So math and reading, additional time for those blocks. We're able to provide each campus with very intensive social emotional support for both students, families, and for teachers who need that support as well in working with students and families. We're also able to engage with different partners throughout, the business community and the community itself to really focus on our parent engagement. And so this model for us, we are able to see tremendous gains after year 1. And so we've been able through the partnership to enhance the model. And so our outcomes really are to accelerate student achievement so that we can put our students in a place where they're competitive with the world and that they be successful and just kids that represent what we're all about. And so just excited to learn more from Shatoya and Diane and their models so that, because I think we all have a space in this to be able to provide kids what they need to be successful.
Great, thank you. So before we move on, let's look at the results of the survey. Let's look at who's out there. Looks like our largest group is educators, wonderful. And our second largest at 38% is advocates. We have 1 funder and a few parents and a few journalists. So let's talk about how you pivoted last spring. March came, COVID exploded, our world changed, and all of a sudden you were told to close your buildings. Starting with you, Diane, how did Summit Public Schools pivot to remote learning?
Thanks, David. Well, we just so happened to be located in the 2 first places in the country to really have and identify COVID cases. So in Santa Clara County in California, and then in Seattle, Washington. So we were very early in early March. It happened very, very quickly. It became evident nearly overnight that we were going to have to close our buildings, which we did on Friday, and reopened the following Tuesday as a virtual school network. And so what I would say is the first and I think most important decision we made was to really brand what we were doing virtual school and not distance learning. And I think that goes to the heart of who we are and what we do. Is the last thing we wanted to convey to our families and students was that we were putting distance between ourselves. What we really were doing was moving out of a physical space and into a virtual space to continue to learn and be connected and be a community for as long as we needed to through really trying horrible times, as it turns out. And it's hard for all of us, I think, to remember back then, but initially, I think a lot of us thought it only would be a couple of weeks, or maybe until spring break, or, and so I think the other smart thing that we did when we pivoted is we didn't assume that that was going to be true. And so we really didn't move into an interim type kind of wait space where a lot of places, I think, just said, oh, we're going to shut for a week or two, or we're going to move our spring break up because we'll be back before you know it. We actually went into full virtual school. We took the one day on Monday to train. Our team had spent the previous week writing a manual that gave teachers and school leaders full support while they were trying to, figure out closing down buildings and whatnot. Full support for on Monday. How do you set up every one of your virtual classes? How do you send calendar invites for that? How do we communicate with everyone? So we got that all set up on Monday. Folks trained and went back into our full regular schedule just virtually on Tuesday. And that is where we have been. We'll get into the nuances of the iterations and things, but that's.
Summit's famous for having the Summit Learning Platform, in which kids spend part of their day, a minority of their day, but part of their day already learning on computer. That must have made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I think you can think about the fact that we had an operating system that enabled us to move seamlessly into the virtual world. And that's really what the platform is that central common operating system infrastructure that allowed us to move into virtual classrooms where, I think a lot of people struggled in just some of these basic, they just didn't have any systems like that and had to.
And for those of you who don't know what Diane means by an operating system, if you're a student, you can open your computer, you can look at a home page which shows where you are in each subject, what you need to focus on, where you're ahead of schedule, where you're behind schedule, and then you can decide, okay, I'm going to focus on math today, and then here's where we are on math. I'll have a playlist. I can use, this video or that textbook or this, different options to learn the next thing I need to learn. So it's a really
Absolutely.
Online learning platform.
And it's where all your work is submitted, where you get feedback from your teachers, where all the lesson plans are, task cards, projects, etc. So you're right, everything is accessible in a single space.
Great. Thank you. So Priscila, tell us about Texas and how you were able to pivot with elementary and middle schoolers.
Absolutely. I would say that one of the benefits of the partnership is the autonomy, as you mentioned earlier. And it provides us to make those decisions and make those very quickly in a more rapid pace. And so one of the ways that the network responded to the changes last spring was that we were able to design our virtual learning platform. So we essentially established these pillars to address whatever we thought we would need. So anything from engagement to content to SEL and to technology. And we, to Diane's point, designed systems out of what does it look like for virtual learning for us to be able to tackle these 4 different pillars. And so what happened was we went back and we repurposed pretty much all of our positions at the campus level to be able to meet the needs in these different pillars. And so all of our non-classroom positions, such as a data analyst or behavior specialist or instructional coach, we found them really now, their job description, quote unquote, really changed. And it was all about to support kids, teachers through this process, families. And so, as we kept going through the year, we were finding things that we would have to go back to the table and rework. So one of the examples, was really creating this easy platform for kids where it's like a one-stop shop, because what we found was, they're going and logging in here and having to open this particular system or open that program. And parents were just pulling their hair out saying, I can't manage this. I have a job that I'm sitting here having to do. I'm having to get off the computer, help my child. And so we had to go back and redesign what are, the most efficient ways for kids to be able to log on and just go through their instruction where there's, they can be self-sufficient even at the elementary level. And so those were things that we were very proud of, that we were able to build quickly. And we are able to do that because we are a network of schools and just moving really quickly and saying, here's what we need, here's what parents are saying, here's what, teachers are saying, and being able to respond in a very, rapid pace.
Great, thank you. Shatoya, I'm dying to hear how a high school with no scheduled classes, all projects, pivots to remote learning. So,
oh yes, it was as smooth as we thought. Like we didn't think that it would be. We thought it was going to be some, we don't have to talk to parents, but our students were already technically savvy because a lot of, again, like Summit, our work is using a Chromebook that is issued to each one of our students already. And so they were able to chime into their sessions. We were able to mail kits out that were for each project for each student. And they were able to engage in the project throughout the cycle. It was really awesome. So it is what most educators call like a flipped classroom per se. They were able to chime in a little bit, talk through that, and then work and then chime in. So it really was really awesome the way that we were able to pivot. We didn't have to focus so much on training our staff on how to utilize our platforms. We didn't have to do a lot of training with our students on how to utilize our platforms because we already were in we do that on a day-to-day basis, whether they're in our space or whether they were at home anyway. So we were very excited how we were just able to pivot that really quickly. I think our focus was a little bit more on, okay, now that they're in a session, how do we foster belonging? How do we foster community? How do we focus on mental stability, right? It was a lot going on. We had to focus on our staff and our students because many of them experienced loss. So how did we support them more in the social emotional learning, as Diane talked about, rather than, the academic piece? We really did a great job in pivoting.
So if they're working on projects, I assume it's as a team. So they had to, I'm assuming you had to have 4 or 5 high school students get together online and keep working on their project?
Oh, yes. And so thanks to Google, who also enhanced themselves in technology and helping on creating meeting rooms for our students to be able to meet together. And that became the facilitator of we call our teachers coaches. So our coaches were able to facilitate that. What they would do in the space, they were able to do with technology, with the meeting rooms. It was really, really awesome.
Great, great. Now, are you still remote or are you in person today?
So me personally, I'm in person at my headquarters. But yes, we are experiencing or engaging in a hybrid model right now. So our students half of our students are here a couple of days a week in person, and then they work virtually for a couple of days a week, and the other half comes in at the end of the week as well. So it's just a hybrid model.
And Priscila's schools are in person now since October. And Diane, I'm assuming since you're in California, you're still virtual school.
The first to go out and probably among the last to go back in. Although I will say yesterday, some of our schools moved into the state tier system that will allow us to open. And so I have had a busy morning as we will be moving towards reopening buildings.
Great. So one of our listeners asked if you were all one-to-one, that is, every student had a laptop already or a computer already. Was that the case?
Yes.
It is for Purdue Polytechnic. We started out as one-to-one. So definitely that made it very easy for us to be able to pivot.
And I assume you were, Diane.
We were one-to-one and had very, very strong coverage of broadband access at home. And so we only needed to support probably about 20% of our students accessing broadband at home, which we were able to do quickly. Yeah.
Now, Priscilla, with elementary students, I bet it was different for you.
Well, and because we serve neighborhood schools, it was different. We were one-to-one, thankfully, because we were already headed in that direction. But our biggest challenge was hotspots and getting internet access for our families. And so thankfully, that's the benefit of having amazing partners such as our district partner who helped us really with that and being able to acquire internet access for all of our students.
So I assume that, you all shifted quickly and that first month was probably hectic, but I assume you've had to continue adjusting since then, as long as you remain virtual. What have been the continual adjustments and what have you learned about doing this well? Shatoya, why don't you go first?
Oh my goodness. So we are a school that also value innovation. And so we've been adjusting quite a bit of our model for a time. However, we going from virtual to a hybrid model is a little bit different than, we found that was some challenges, even more than when everyone is virtual. And so you have different schedules and of such that you will have to work through. And then we have some students who are still all virtual because we had that option too. So if you think of it, one of my staff members said it was like having 5 schools in one space at one time, because you have a group of cohort of students. Some are virtual, some are hybrid, and we had 2 hybrid options. It was just a lot going on. So I would think that is the pivot from virtual that we went from is going all virtual to the hybrid model.
And how about you, Diane? What adjustments and what learnings have you had along the way?
Yeah, a couple of key ones. We are a continuous improvement organization, and so we are always in a cycle of continuously improving and iterating. Again, we've been virtual the entire time. So one key iteration was last spring. As we move towards our sort of last 6 to 8 weeks in the year, which is normally a time where we always have a finish strong campaign where we're finishing the year strong, students are meeting their outcomes and mastery, and we are have a personalized approach. We were able to create sort of 4 different pathways for students that were really responsive to their full set of needs, and allow families to choose the pathway and the approach that worked best for them and then personalize. And, a couple of examples of that there were students who had, felt like they could really were feeling a lot of fatigue of being online all day long and on camera all day long, and felt like there were certain subjects or courses where they could take the materials and do a lot of the learning on their own asynchronously, but other places where they really needed to be in community with their teachers. And so we gave them a lot of choice and a lot of, personalization around that. It was very powerful. By the end of the year, with those choices, our families felt very supported. They felt like they were getting what they needed and able to adjust without, this was in the face of a lot of districts making sweeping policy choices, like everyone's going to get an A, everyone's going to get a pass, everyone's going to do this. And ours was a very personalized approach where families could make choices that best served them. So that was one big one. And then this past fall, I would actually say the re-entry to school and the onboarding, I'm sure we all experienced brand new families who we literally had never we had never seen them, and we still haven't to this day. It's only been a virtual relationship. And we always spend a couple of weeks at the start of the year really onboarding people into the community and re-entering school. And we had to take all those important elements of our culture and our community and translate them into the virtual world. And I will say that when you're clear about your outcomes and the tools you have, our team was phenomenally creative in figuring out how to do that in the virtual space, and quite frankly, discovered some real advantages. When you're a student who shows up on first day of school to a brand new school and there's hundreds of people there all at once that you're sort of bombarded with, we were able to have this very gradual entry that started with very small, safe groups and then worked its way out where every student was seen and sort of given an opportunity to belong. So surprisingly, some real, powerful new learnings that we will hold on to as we move forward, even when we go back in person.
Great, great. And Priscilla, how about you? Adjustments and learnings along the way?
Yeah, I would say a lot of learnings for us. It forced us really to have to learn and to have to innovate even more than what we have done. I know that when we started all virtual, and even dating back to last summer, we really never stopped school. We just kept going. I mean, kids had the computers at home. We had teachers that were willing to still be teaching our kids. And so, kids were continually getting that online learning as we could, deliver it. I would even say parent engagement for us. That's always a challenge for many of us is getting, folks to be engaged in the schools and even for myself as a parent as being busy, it's a challenge all the way around, but having now this virtual space to be able to engage and not, have to be at 5 places at once, but now I can stop and take some time and really, connect with, the teacher, the school staff. That has been positive for us. We've seen, the percentage of engagement for our families go up. And so even now, we are, I would say, at an average about 70% in person across our 6 campuses, which I will say is a true testament of our administrators and our teachers who have worked so hard, especially at all the safety protocols. And really the key thing is building those relationships with parents and families. We've had to be even more intentional about tracking the performance and mastery of kids every single day because of the gaps, because of, what has taken place. And so, just recently we completed our middle of the year map data, and we're seeing that students are on track for meeting that expected growth even in the middle of the pandemic. And so for us, we see that our teachers are working so hard and have learned valuable lessons when it comes to, blended learning and how that can be a positive experience for our kids. And we've been able to, test out new things with blended learning that we never even knew before. And so, one example is at a school, we have, a teacher who now is able to help students at another school, just because of that virtual space that we are now engaged in. We never would have thought of being able to do those type of things. So I also am with Diane, just want to hang on to this learning and just keep building from it.
Great, great. Well, I'm going to turn it over. We're halfway through. I'm going to turn it over to Tressa to lead us through the second half of this.
Thanks, David. I'm dying to jump in here. You all have shared already so many amazing experiences. So David asked you about how you were able to pivot, and you all had different logistical stories to share and things about your learning platforms. I'd like to go a little deeper into the why you were able to pivot. And I'm sure it's unique to each of your organization, but I want you to think of this in a way that you were able to do things that perhaps traditional schools were not, and why that was. And I'd like to start with Priscilla, if that's okay.
Sure. So again, one of the benefits of the partnership is, that we have the autonomy to set up the way that we run business. And so for us as a Leadership Academy Network, we have 4 team members, a leadership team that manages and operates the schools and support the all 6 campuses. So I, as a senior officer, I work with the campus leaders and the leadership teams. I have an ED for academics who does all things curriculum, assessments, instruction. I have an ED for operations who works with the operational type issues and a coordinator to support us. And we have been able to work with our campuses very closely in providing that tailored support to schools. And I would say, that every single campus has very strong systems for instruction, for culture, and for operations, which are the 3 things that we see that a school has to have. And so what we do is we come in and we provide that tailored instruction in those 3 areas. And so when it comes to having a pivot because of something, then campuses were ready to transition because, you know, those systems are in place. And so for us, you know, having that virtual plan where we were able to launch it, it was very easy to do that because I, you know, I'm working with campus leaders. We have the instruction person, we have the operations person, and everybody has clear defined roles on what they do. And we're able to just really quickly tailor what our support to campuses are based on their needs. And so that is not true in a larger setting, obviously, because, you know, there's so many different factors when it comes to that. But that's been our experience in being able to, why we were able to pivot so quickly.
And how did you coordinate the communication between that leadership team?
Yeah, so, you know, it's the 4 of us, and we work very closely with the campus leaders and their leadership teams. So, you know, my academics person, she basically comes in and says, this is what we're going to do. This is what we need to do to be successful. This is, you know, the instructional model. These are the curriculum that we're going to use. And so I come in behind her. I'm the implementer. So we work shoulder to shoulder, and I'm able to support campuses, the principals, assistant principals, their teams, and saying, here's what, you know, needs to be done. How are we going to do it? And so there's a very close, tight-knit communication between our team and the campus teams. And we meet, you know, so often. We have those relationships to be able to just bounce ideas off of each other. And I just want to make it very clear that the relationship too is we work for schools. The schools don't work for us. And so with that mindset, you know, we jump and we do whatever we need to do to support our campus principals and their leadership teams, because they're the ones in the front lines.
Was there a request from any of your campuses that was more difficult than others to meet?
You know what? There always is, you know, and there's always different variables from one campus to the next. We have one campus that has a higher percentage of veteran teachers than another campus where we have brand new teachers. So the support needs to be tailored according to what campuses need. And so that's what we come in and say, okay, what is it that you need? How can we provide that support? We're going to walk alongside you to make sure that all the gaps are filled. And so that's been the biggest benefit to the partnership, because we're able to tailor that support very tightly to what our teachers and what our administrators need.
I'm really glad that you made the point about you working for the schools rather than the schools working for you. I think for a lot of people, that's probably a novel concept. Now, you're up next. Tell us why you were able to pivot as an innovation school in a traditional school district when this unexpected calamity happened last spring.
Yeah, and so similar to what Priscilla was talking through, we had committees. First of all, we have an agreement with the district, but we do have our own network and governance. So we have in our network, we organize committees that engaged with the school leadership, which is myself, and the different parties. When you talk about curriculum, we have a director of curriculum, we have a director of student services, we have some other entities, and we all started in a committee, and we just worked through all the challenges that we felt that we needed to plan out the best way to be able to pivot. And we also worked on, you know, things like the social emotional learning, like what does that look like to support them? What does it look like with technology? Technology breaks down. When you're in the building, it's really easy to service very quickly, but when students are at home, like what are we going to do with those challenges? And we had the technology director on a committee to work on those things. And so once we came together with that committee, we formed a reopening plan and what that looks like. And then we worked, and that communication came down from the committees to the school leaders, to the school leadership, and all the way down to the parents and the students. And because our parents and students already had the training on how to navigate our systems when it comes to virtual learning and all the technology, we were able to focus on things like, okay, if your technology breaks down, this is the process for that. If you need nutrition, food services part of that committee, this is the process for that. We were able to pivot around, like Priscilla talked about, the needs. We have 3 locations. We have one in South Bend, 2 in Indianapolis on the north side and on the Near East side. One campus is larger than the other 2, like myself. So we were able to cater to the direct needs of the community and the students that were in that community.
And you have another layer as well, because you talked about how your classrooms don't have walls and you work with experts in the community, and you have corporate or nonprofit sponsors who bring some of these real world problems that your students work on. So you had this extra layer. I know I said I was going to ask why, not how, but while we're on the topic, tell us how you incorporated all of those moving pieces into your remote learning.
Yes, so we have community partners that we have a cadence with, which means that we work with them on a yearly basis. And so they are technically savvy on how to work with our systems that goes on. However, us going virtual, it actually allowed us to enhance that community outreach. Our students were working with experts that were in different countries. They were in different states. And so I would say that it really helped us to get our tentacles out to those experts a little bit more efficient. What our students had to do was learn other platforms because of the community partners. They would use other platforms that we were not using. So they did have to learn how to do that, but it really enhanced it took our walls further than where they were before. So that was really awesome. But the cadence, the partnerships that we have, we have 12 project cycles in a year for our students with the same partners. And so we definitely had to make sure that all of our stakeholders were aware of our reopening plan and the safety protocols that we had to put in place for our students, and the timelines, of course, of what that looked like, even as we pivot from virtual to hybrid or hybrid to in-person, all these different, we got all this vocabulary now, they all have different meanings. It's so funny. But as we pivot through all the vocabulary, we had to make sure that our staff, our students, our partnerships, and our families understood what that vocabulary was and what the expectations were behind it.
Interesting that something so basic is such a critical, vocabulary, right? So critical. Diane, you have already answered this question in a couple of ways. One, by citing your strong platform as a reason why, and also your initial foresight to not take this as a temporary problem. Can you expound on other things that allowed why you were able to make the quick pivot?
Certainly, and what Priscilla and Shatoya have shared really resonates, and so maybe I would, bucket some of that under the heading of certainly the infrastructure was a huge part of this, the one-to-one and the platform and the bandwidth and whatnot. But the reality that we have a very clear model, we have very clear expectations and outcomes. We know what we're driving for all kids. We have a mission that is, our North Star and directionally where we're going, and makes it not confusing at all about what we're headed towards, and that everyone is on that same page and moving in that same direction is a huge part of what enabled us to pivot. And then second, it is similar to what we've heard here. We have a governance structure. We are a nonprofit, so a standalone nonprofit that does operate public schools, but we have a governance structure and approach that has always respected and honored educators as professionals and as decision makers. And we really bring decisions as close to the students and families as possible, and have, as they've described, systems and structures that were in place before the pandemic to make decisions collaboratively across all of our leaders, and those got moved. They are actually more efficient now because everyone's online. And so we have daily huddles where we have real strong decision-making, collaborative, consensus-based processes that just got stronger during the pandemic. That approach to really having the people who are doing the work, who know the families, who are the professionals making all of those key decisions and having the ability to make those decisions very quickly, very responsively, and quite frankly, with an anti-bias, anti-racist lens, which let's not forget that we've had a twin pandemic this year, rightfully so. That's at the core of our ability to do what we're doing.
You started off by talking about the fact that you're autonomous, and you all have autonomies that district schools do not have to varying degrees between your organizations. And we'd like to ask the audience what they think about this. We have another survey, and this survey is a two-part survey, so be sure you answer both. Should other school districts create the kind of autonomy for their schools that these public schools operated by our panelists enjoy? It's a yes or no. And do you think your local school district leaders, the board and superintendent, would be open to learning more and exploring the idea of autonomous public schools? Yes or no? And we'll come back and check on those answers for a minute. But while we're on the subject of autonomy, could you talk about whether you think that you all would have been able to do this if you were not autonomous from a central office? And Shatoya, maybe we could start with you this time.
I would say yes, we would, but with delay, and more delay. I worked with some of the
loss, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we pivoted, I like how Priscila talked about there really wasn't a lot of learning loss, right? Like we pivoted and our students were still learning as we were pivoted because they understood our infrastructure, they understood the technology, they understood like our outcomes, everything was in line. It was a flipped classroom. We were able to just go. But I was part of some of the consultancy when it comes to the district. And there were items that they were still thinking through, such as resources. We were able to take our resources right away and say, man, we need to focus on internet. So let's get some hotspots for staff and students. And we always say students, but staff needed it too. Let's provide, resources for staff so that they can be ready for, the instruction that goes on in virtual learning in their homes. We were able to directly take that resource, directly use that resource in real time for real data so that we can move academic forward. But the district had to wait because now you have to talk to the technology department, who needs to talk to the transportation department, who needs to talk to the food service department. And they have to come together and work diligently for quite a bit of time to hear from politicians, to hear from everybody else before they can make up a sound decision. And what we learned is some of the decisions that big districts, I'm not going to name any, they delayed their openings, they delayed learning because they wasn't prepared. And they needed extra time for that preparation so that they can deliver the resources that were needed for learning, so that they can talk about safety, talk about transportation, talk about, how kids are going to eat. Like all of that thing was involved in the decision making. And it just took a lot of delay. And we were able to pivot, as Priscila talked about quickly, as Diane talked about very quickly with the small teams that we had, and incorporated our teacher voices, our parent voices, our student voices, all along without the delay. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Your energy is awesome. Diane, this is probably a hard question for you to answer because you're so standalone. And I think Summit even offered some support to students who were not in schools that were able to provide for their needs. What can you tell us about your thoughts on the autonomy issue in the context of Summit?
I certainly appreciate and again resonate with Shatoya's perspective and come out of traditional districts, and so it's really resonates with me what I've seen through this pandemic and what I previously experienced. I think the thing that I would highlight here is when we make decisions, we have a guiding principle for every decision is we make decisions that are in the best interest of students. And I think that that it sounds obvious and it's really difficult to do. And I think if you really, reflected upon so many of the decisions that have been made in this pandemic, students haven't been centered in those decisions, and the decisions have become incredibly political, with sort of everyone else considered. And I do think that our autonomy has allowed us to stay out of that and stay in a place where we're really clear about the criteria for our decisions. We are honest about the emotion that we all bring and the bias and the perspective based on our own life experiences that we all bring, but because we do it collaboratively, we have all those different perspectives and we're able to get to an outcome that is truly in the best interest of students given the circumstances. And to me, that's the real difference, is to stay out of that sort of
Right.
toxic
And
space, yeah.
your point about being student centric is it just resonates so deeply with all of us who care about this issue and who are watching, the reopening debates now play out nationally across the country. And Priscila, what about you? Did you have enough autonomy? Would you have been able to do what you did without the autonomies that you do have?
I would say that, we have an amazing relationship with our district partner. So in many ways, we needed them through this, whole shift and pivoting of going to virtual, because it was, frankly, it was a platform that none of us knew, that we were about to take on. And so we really came together and utilized the support of one another for it. But as far as the autonomies, naturally, when you think about a large district who has many different configuration of schools and many different needs, there are a lot of things to consider. And so, for us, having a small subset of schools where we have, the same demographics, their neighborhood schools, we are able to pivot more quickly, and we're able to make decisions, and we're able to really provide a more tailored support. And we do have the autonomies for that. I think it's important to note, and it goes back to what David was saying, is that we're held accountable, though, at the end of the day, for our decisions and the decisions that we make and the decisions that we don't make for kids. And so it's important as a operating an autonomous entity that we don't, leave our district partner out, that we still have that mindset that we're always collaborating, that we're learning from one another, but at the same time that they provide us, and they have provided us the space to really be able to learn new things and what works and what's not working for our kids, so that it benefits the district at large.
That's great. That's great to hear that you're getting the support that you need from the district as well. It sounds like kind of a two-way street there. That's nice to hear. Let's take a quick look at the survey results to see what the audience thinks about autonomies. And it looks like it's an overwhelming 85% believe that more districts should provide more autonomy. But the winning answer, so to speak, on whether the audience thinks that it's possible is only at 45%, with 23% saying not at all, and 33% saying yes. Well, the 33% is encouraging. So we have a couple more questions that I really want to get to before we run out of time. So for a short answer, I think it's important for us to hear how you are measuring student progress when the kids are remote or hybrid. So Diane, I'm going to let you start this time. You're measuring a lot of things that sound hard to measure, like your universal skills and your critical thinking and habits of success. How are you measuring those during the pandemic?
Um, well, to be very brief, we have never been really reliant on external assessments because we do have a whole internal infrastructure for assessing our universal skills, our habits of success. And so that infrastructure stayed in place. We're able to track exactly where our kids are in the way that we always have. We don't have that sort of external standardized test system in place, if you will, but it really hasn't impacted how we do our work.
And Shatoya, are you able to measure your students as they move through their projects in the same way that you did before, or have you had to adapt?
In the same way that we've done before, because we also use the transferable skills within competency, and that's how they're assessed in their projects. Then we have an online component also that we utilize that gives us real-time data on skill development that we've been able to address the needs and support our students with. So it really has not changed. I resonate with, I think Diana referred to the all grade systems, all these decisions that were, based on grades and things of the sort. We just kept on going. We knew what the expectation for our students were, what their outcomes were. We knew where we looked at our data and the assessments, and we adjusted there, but we did not adjust in the systems on how we grade them or assess them.
Thank you. And Priscila, has your student assessment stayed kind of similar to what you were doing before, or is that an area where you've had to adapt as well?
And the area that we've had to adapt is really just identifying what the gaps are for kids and seeing how we're going to make sure that we go back and make that, be able to meet their needs and the student expectations that they're lacking, or even prerequisite skills. And so we've had to do a lot of work on, what does third grade curriculum look like now? And what does it look like for a student now to be ready to go into middle school? And so just really having to go back and look at that. We have a system where we track our students every day to see if they learned it or not, just basic assessment, just a formative assessment. Did the student master that concept? We have our online assessments, but one of the biggest things for us is when we started this project, we had the lens of really looking at student growth, and we were able to grow kids, but then we started shifting more into achievement to make sure that our students were competitive with the rest of the world. And the pandemic put a pause on that, because now we're having to go back and look at growth again and making sure that we are moving kids even in the midst of everything that's taking place. So we're going to get back to where we need to be. But the main thing for us has been, we've got to have our head in the game. We can't let anything get in the way of the mindset of we need to move kids, and we need to still have that sense of urgency for our students, even more so now. And so, our teachers, our administrators have done such an amazing job at just really kind of thinking through that.
Right. So we have 3 minutes left if we're going to end on time. And the question I really, really didn't want to miss was, what would you quickly say to staff and leaders at schools that maybe don't have as much autonomy as you do? What advice would you offer them? And Shatoya, can you give us that answer to start with?
I would say wherever you are the influencer, start there. For me, it used to be in my classroom. And so wherever you are the influencer, start there.
Diane?
I think that's great advice. I love it. I think our focus has been on, we call it simplicity on the other side of complexity, in honor of that sort of time on quote, which is really, look, these are really complicated, complex times. How do we get to a place where we understand and we grapple with that complexity, but we make it simple for people, because it's just too much to carry and too much load to think about. And so simplicity.
Thank you. And Priscila?
I would say take care of people. Make sure that we all understand that there's been a lot of challenges that we've gone through. So our teachers and campus leaders need the tools to do the work. At the same time, we can't let the foot off the gas pedal. We've got to have those high expectations, that sense of urgency. We've got to push our students and so that they can make sure that they're where they need to be.
I love all three of your answers to all the questions. This has just been wonderful. I do want to just quickly mention before I turn it back to David that if you are curious about Shatoya Ward School, we did a report at Reinventing America's School Project, and there is actually kind of a case study about her school in that report. And you can find that on the Progressive Policy Institute website under the Reinventing Schools tab. So if her energy and enthusiasm, like Priscila's and Diane's, has sparked your interest in autonomous schools, please check that out. And David, I'll leave it to you to take us out.
Oh, you're muted.
I don't usually mute, so I forgot that I was muted. Sorry about that. I should add, Tressa, that before your time, about 5 years ago, we also did a report on Summit Public Schools, which is also on our website. So if you're curious about Summit and its learning platform, you can learn about it there. There were a couple of audience questions that I'm going to take a couple more minutes and ask people to respond briefly. The one was, did you have unions? And if so, were they a hindrance at pivoting quickly? Priscila?
We're not a union state. We have teacher associations, but we have great relationships with them. So we work closely.
Shatoya?
We are not under the union, but we do have an agreement with the district that is.
Okay, and Diane?
We do have a union, and we are in California and have worked collaboratively.
And so there no hindrance. Great. Another set of questions. What were the biggest challenges engaging parents and students with the new remote modality?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. I think the biggest challenge for parents and students, and we're engaging them, is the environment during the sessions. We were able to continue on in our education, but it's a different environment with different distractions for students. And it's very challenging for a parent who might have multiple students who's in virtual learning in different schools. I remember being in sessions and hearing other teachers in other schools while, we're trying to work with a student and facilitating a project. So it was very challenging for that environment that they were in. I will end that.
Mm-hmm. The other two?
For us, it was just, what I mentioned earlier about, not having to go to this website and that website and just, not really being sure about where everything was housed to best support their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Diane?
Similar to Shatoya, we had the same challenges, and so ended up getting very granular and asking families how to support their needs and getting really creative. So literally, we ended up sending out noise canceling headphones to certain kids and backgrounds and teaching them how to do that, and a variety of things are how we think about cameras to be able to help the space, whatever space they are in, work as well as possible, and the conditions.
Truly personalized.
Truly.
Yeah. And the final question, how did you support English as a second language and students with disabilities during this time? Shatoya, do you want to go first?
Oh, yes. Through our scheduling system, we were able to provide what we call small group sessions for those individuals to support them in the needs that are tailored just to them with our staff.
Great.
We did the same, just able to really make sure that our teachers, our SPED teachers or any push-in teachers were there to support students in small group or individual instruction.
What I would add is we were able to move all of our service providers to online virtual environments literally that quickly. They were amazing, and our team was amazing. So no one missed a beat in terms of their services. Again, sticking with the same program allowed the work to look very similar to what it did in person.
Great. Well, we just got a final question from the staff of a congressman. Do we have broad policy suggestions for policy makers going forward, looking towards the future post-pandemic. And I'll just say for the Progressive Policy Institute, we really urge states to pass legislation empowering districts to give their schools more autonomy and districts to implement that. And we published, as Tressa said, in October, we published a guide called The Third Way, a guide to implementing innovation schools. It's long, it's detailed, it's got model legislation in it, and that's what I would recommend you look at from our point of view. Having said that, I want to thank all our panelists. You guys are wonderful. Your schools are wonderful. And we really appreciate your spending the time with us. Thank you.
David. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
so much.
David. Thank you, Tressa.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone who tuned in.
And thanks to Sloan for making it all work.